Pause this video. Actually, no, don't pause it. Because if you click away right now, you might miss the single most important financial admission of our lifetime. Not a rumor, not a source close to the matter, not a theory whispered on a trading desk. This was a sworn statement under oath inside a United States Senate hearing room. A man in a suit raised his right hand, promised to tell the truth, and then said something so explosive it detonated the foundation of the modern silver market in one sentence. His name is Marcus Webb, Senior Vice President of Metals Operations at CME Group, the company that controls COMEX, the largest precious metals exchange on Earth. And according to the leaked audio now circulating at the highest levels of finance, he admitted the vaults don't match the paper. He admitted the silver is effectively gone. He admitted that the market you thought was real has been running on fractions. What does that mean in plain English? It means the world has been trading silver the way banks trade money. Not one-to-one, not metal for metal. But on a system of layered claims, ownership structures stacked on top of ownership structures, until the same ounce is counted multiple times and sold to multiple people. It means that for every 100 ounces you believe exist inside the COMEX system, only a small portion is truly deliverable. The rest is an accounting mirage, a promise, a number on a screen. And yesterday, for the first time in decades, that mirage was dragged into the light under penalty of perjury. Here's why this becomes a Senate bombshell. Because COMEX isn't a niche marketplace. It isn't a collector's club. It is the beating heart of global metals pricing. It is the reference point banks use to price derivatives. It is the mechanism that sets the tone for industrial procurement, hedging strategies, ETF holdings, and futures settlement across continents. If the COMEX inventory reporting is inflated, or if physical availability is not what the market assumes, then the pricing system isn't just wrong, it's structurally fraudulent. And the second that reality becomes widely believed, the entire paper silver market stops behaving like a market and starts behaving like a bank run. This story begins in Washington on a day when most people weren't even watching. It was a federal holiday. Markets were closed, the public was distracted, but behind closed doors, the machine moved. An executive order was signed with a single line that would pull the pin on decades of paper leverage, a full physical audit of strategic metal reserves held in U.S. vaults, including the COMEX system itself. The headline readers missed it, the talking heads ignored it, but the people who understand plumbing, auditors, custodians, clearing members, felt a chill immediately. Because if you force a real count, you force the system to choose between truth and stability. And yesterday, the truth won. When auditors arrived at the vault facilities, they didn't come for opinions. They came for ounces. The official inventory report suggested a massive stockpile, hundreds of millions of ounces, enough metal to support the illusion of safety. But what they allegedly found wasn't lower than expected. It was catastrophic, a number so small compared to the paper claim that it turns the entire exchange into a fractional reserve metal bank. And that's when the phone lines exploded. That's when the Senate Banking Committee moved fast, behind closed doors, with no cameras, no press, no public record, except someone was recording. And by nightfall, that recording was reportedly in the hands of the biggest news organizations on Earth. So now we need to walk into that room. Because what was said in those minutes doesn't just move price, it changes the rules. It tells you what your silver exposure actually is. It tells you how close the system is to breaking. And it explains why panic began before the public even understood what happened. Inside that hearing room, the air wasn't tense like a normal political argument. It was tense like a courtroom right before the verdict drops. The Senate wasn't asking about charts or trends or speculative mania. They were asking one question. Is the inventory real, or is it paper fiction dressed up as reality? Senator Elizabeth Warren went first, direct and surgical, pointing at the discrepancy between reported inventory and what a physical count would suggest. And Marcus Webb, the man responsible for metal operations, didn't answer immediately. He turned to his lawyers. He whispered. And for nearly 2 full minutes, the room sat in silence. That silence matters, because silence isn't confusion. Silence is calculation. Silence is the moment someone realizes the truth will hurt, but lying under oath will destroy them. Then came the answer. Not a denial, not a confident rebuttal. A legal phrase constructed like a firewall. He reportedly said the inventory reporting system operates under a different methodology than a physical count would suggest. That sounds harmless until you translate it into plain speech. It means the number can be true on paper while being impossible in real life. It means the same bar can be counted more than once because multiple ownership structures claim it simultaneously. It means the system reports abundance while the vault contains scarcity. And the moment those words are spoken under oath, the market stops being a market and becomes a crime scene. Senator John Kennedy didn't let him escape into corporate language. He cut through it like a blade. A simple man's question, designed to trap a complicated lie. Are you telling this committee the same silver is counted multiple times? Because if that's true, then the entire reported inventory is a mirage. And Webb could not deny the foundation. He reportedly admitted what the industry has always quietly relied on, what the public was never supposed to say out loud. The market operates on a fractional basis. Decades, normalized, institutionalized, accepted as how it works. But here's the problem. The public didn't consent to fractional silver. Retail buyers didn't buy exposure to a fraction. They bought the belief that silver meant silver, that when they pay for metal, the metal exists. And then the question arrived, the one that detonates everything. A single sentence that transforms an accounting debate into a delivery crisis. Under oath, directly, no wiggle room, Senator Warren asked if every contract holder demanded delivery tomorrow. Could COMEX fulfill those requests? The room went dead. And that silence was the sound of a system hitting the wall. Then came the word that changes history. No, not unlikely, not challenging, no, a refusal of reality. According to the leaked audio, Webb admitted the exchange could not meet physical delivery for more than a small portion of open interest. A fraction so low, it turns the entire promise structure into a confidence game. The implication is brutal. For every 100 ounces traders believe they own, only a small percentage is physically there to deliver, while the rest is an ocean of paper claims, chasing a shrinking island of real bars. That's when panic begins, not in the headlines, but in the machines. Because markets are not emotional, people are. But markets are built on rules, and once the rules are threatened, the machines react faster than humans can breathe. The moment this audio leaked, the overnight market responded like an electric shock. Futures spiked violently. Circuit breakers triggered. Trading halts hit like emergency doors slamming shut. The system couldn't handle the truth moving through it. And before we go deeper, if you want this channel to keep tracking stories like this in real time, hit the like button and subscribe right now. Because what happens next isn't just a price move, it's a chain reaction, a paper collapse that turns into an industrial crisis. And once you see the mechanics, you'll understand why the panic won't stop at silver traders. It spreads to factories, to supply chains, to governments, to your entire world. When the paper market shakes, it's easy to dismiss it as financial drama, numbers flashing, traders screaming, volatility. But the moment physical dealers stop selling, the story leaves finance and enters reality. Because silver is not a luxury metal anymore. Silver is a functional metal. It is embedded inside the modern world like wiring inside a living organism. It's in the phone in your pocket, the solar panel on your roof, the EV rolling down the street, the satellite above your head, the defense systems behind your nation's security. And unlike money, silver cannot be printed. It cannot be synthesized on command. It cannot be replaced at scale with something cheaper without losing performance, exactly where performance matters most. So when the market hears that only a fraction of claims can be delivered, the next rational move is obvious: secure physical supply. That's why the first wave of panic wasn't retail investors. It was dealers, it was wholesalers, it was industrial buyers, the people who cannot afford to be wrong, the people whose production lines die without delivery. And as reports spread overnight, Singapore refusing to sell, Shanghai hitting limits, London issuing statements that mean nothing but fear, the world started to experience the difference between silver price and silver availability. Those are not the same market. They're not the same universe. The next consequence is always the same in a fractional system. Once the public learns the truth, the holders of paper scramble to become holders of metal. The moment that conversion wave starts, the system doesn't gracefully adjust. It breaks. Because it was never designed for everyone to ask for delivery at the same time. It was designed for most people to settle in cash, most of the time, quietly, while the myth of full backing remains intact. And in the shadows of this system sits the most dangerous position of all, the concentrated short exposure, the so-called death bag. A handful of banks, over decades, building massive short positions that rely on one assumption: the price can be managed, the physical can be sourced, delivery can be rolled, and the public will never demand the bars. But if physical supply is truly far smaller than reported, and if industrial demand starts hoarding, then those short positions stop being trades and become extinction events. Because you cannot cover a short with metal that doesn't exist. You can only cover it by bidding for what little remains. And when a bank has promised hundreds of millions of ounces into a system that contains a fraction of that amount, you're not looking at a normal squeeze. You're looking at a forced repricing so violent it threatens balance sheets. You're looking at losses that can erase institutions. And when institutions fall, governments intervene, not out of compassion, but out of survival. The first industrial signals are always subtle at the start. A delayed shipment, a supplier unable to quote, a procurement team suddenly silent. Then it escalates into emergencies, manufacturers declaring supply crises, assembly lines slowing. Entire operations paused because a tiny amount of silver paste or solder or contact material can be sourced at any price they are willing to admit publicly. The world doesn't stop when it runs out of money. It stops when it runs out of critical inputs. This is why silver is the perfect storm metal. It is essential. It is consumed. It is dispersed into products and lost to recycling inefficiencies. It is inelastic in industrial applications where you cannot substitute without failure. And it has been financially engineered into a paper market where claims can multiply far beyond the vault's ability to deliver. That combination isn't just volatile, it's unstable by design. A system like that doesn't correct. It snaps. And now that the Senate has forced the admission into daylight, the only question left is how the authorities respond. Not whether the shortage exists, but how they manage the panic without admitting the full scale of what they allowed to happen. Here's the part that should make you uneasy because it reveals the limits of power. Treasury can investigate. Regulators can review procedures. Agencies can announce emergency task forces. The SEC can halt trading in products that pretend they're backed by metal. Politicians can stand behind podiums and promise accountability, but none of them can do the one thing the market demands. They cannot create silver out of thin air. Money is a political instrument. Silver is physics. Silver exists or it does not. An ounce can be counted or it cannot. And once a physical audit exposes that the system has been running on leverage, stacked on leverage, the entire world is forced back into a reality it tried to escape. Scarcity is real, and it has consequences. This is why cash settlement becomes the escape hatch. When delivery becomes impossible, institutions reach for paper solutions. They offer dollars instead of metal. They settle contracts in cash. They change rules temporarily. They raise margin requirements. They restrict delivery eligibility. They tighten the noose around the one action that would collapse the system instantly, mass physical withdrawal. And they will frame it as stability. They will call it orderly markets. They will call it protecting investors. But the truth will be simpler. They will do it because they have no choice. And that is the moment when your definition of ownership becomes the only thing that matters. If you hold physical silver allocated in your possession in audited storage, then you don't have a promise. You have the thing itself. In a world where the industrial economy is bidding for every remaining ounce, that is not just an investment. It's leverage, it's optionality, it's power. But if you hold paper silver, the kind that lives in an account statement or an ETF prospectus, then you hold a claim against a system that just admitted it cannot deliver on all claims at once. This is why the idea of fair price collapses. Fair price exists in a liquid market where supply can meet demand. But in a shortage, price becomes a rationing tool. It rises until somebody stops buying. It rises until marginal demand breaks. It rises until people who have metal finally sell. That's how a shortage is solved, not by kindness, but by pain. The price has to go high enough to force metal out of hiding. And this is where the range becomes terrifying, because it's not about excitement, it's math. If only a fraction of open interest is deliverable, and if industrial buyers cannot function without silver, then the clearing price that restores balance is not a gentle move upward. It's a step change, a reset, a price that makes hoarding expensive, a price that forces recycling and scrap recovery into overdrive, a price that turns dormant inventories into supply. Now, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly in the comments, because this is bigger than silver, bigger than one hearing, bigger than one exchange. If a critical industrial metal can be traded in a fractional system for decades, where claims vastly exceed reality, what else in the modern financial world is priced on the same illusion? And if that illusion can break overnight, what does that say about the true stability of any paper-backed asset you have been told is safe? Because once you understand that this isn't merely a silver story, you begin to see it as a template. The template is simple. Create a paper market large enough to control price, allow claims to multiply beyond inventory, rely on the assumption that most participants will never demand delivery, and manage volatility through rules that favor the issuers. It works until it doesn't. And the exact moment it stops working is when the public realizes the numbers were never real. If the Senate hearing forced that realization into the open, then the next phase isn't about debate. It's about reaction. It's about how fast the industrial world shifts from purchasing to securing. It's about how quickly paper holders realize they're holding receipts, not metal. And it's about how violently price moves when confidence dies. So what happens next is not a mystery. It's a sequence. First comes denial, dressed in legal language and carefully managed statements. Then comes containment, emergency reviews, temporary halts, methodology discussions, and quiet backroom meetings between regulators and banks. Then comes the real pivot, rule changes that prevent the system from being tested by physical demand. And finally comes repricing, because the only cure for scarcity is price, not the price on a screen, the price paid for delivery, for real bars, for metal that exists. If the testimony under oath becomes widely believed, the paper market's credibility cracks permanently. COMEX doesn't need to default to fail. It only needs to lose trust. Because in a commodity market, trust is the lubricant that keeps paper claims flowing. When trust breaks, everybody tries to convert paper into physical at once. And the moment that happens, the system is revealed for what it is, a structure designed for settlement, not for delivery. a marketplace built on the assumption that most people will accept cash and move on. This is why the next 30 days matter, not because of what commentators predict, but because of what industrial procurement teams do. If they panic and hoard, the metal disappears from circulation. If they start bidding against each other, premiums explode. If governments respond by classifying silver as strategic, export controls and emergency buying programs follow. And if banks cannot cover short exposures because the available physical supply is too small, the losses become systemic. This is also why the spot price becomes less relevant by the hour. Spot price is the story. Delivery is the truth. When dealers refuse to sell, when manufacturers can't source inputs, when supply chains begin to stall, the market is no longer discovering price. It is discovering scarcity. And scarcity does not negotiate. Scarcity demands a higher bid until someone breaks. Now let's bring it back to you, because this is where the story stops being global and becomes personal. If you own physical silver, your position is fundamentally different than it was yesterday. You own something the industrial world needs and cannot easily obtain. But if you own silver exposure through paper, ETFs, unallocated accounts, or positions that rely on someone else's promise, then you need to understand the risk in one sentence. When settlement comes, they may not give you metal. They will give you cash. And they will give you cash at a price designed to protect the system, not to protect you. The paper-silver era was built on one invisible assumption. Nobody would force the system to prove its honesty. Yesterday, the Senate forced the proof, and the system flinched. That's why this date will be remembered, not as a spike in price, but as the moment the public learned the difference between ownership and exposure, between a bar and a claim, between metal and mythology. For 50 years, the market ran on trust. Trust in reports, trust in inventory, trust in settlement, trust that the promise was backed by reality. If sworn testimony shatters that trust, it doesn't come back with a press release. It doesn't come back with a policy memo. It only comes back when the metal is there. And if it isn't there, then the future of silver pricing isn't a debate. It's a reset. Remember one number, because this number will echo through every headline, every panic move, every manufacturing disruption, every bank's risk desk, and every government briefing from here forward. The fraction of deliverable metal compared to the claims. If that fraction is as low as the testimony suggests, then the panic isn't beginning. It's already here. And the only question left is who recognizes it first, and who learns too late that in a real-world shortage, paper cannot save you.